Let's tell you a little bit about myself, beyond what was just shared. I do go to a wonderful church in Kansas City called Christ Community. It's an evangelical free church. This is my lovely family. My wife there is on the far left, and then our 3 adult children, 2 beautiful daughters-in-law, and 2 lovely grandkids. So that's our family unit as of this moment. And Teresa and I have been married for 40 years, which is pretty cool in itself. And I've been doing this architecture thing for 45 years. I'm sorry I'm a little verklempt right now. That video got to me. Because this is what I was made for. I agree with Timothy 100%. So I'm going to tell you about my career in 1 minute, except the most important picture is missing for some reason. Okay, 1 minute about my career. I have worked in 45 years in professional practice. I've worked at 7 firms and in 3 different cities. Started off with a little bitty architect, and I will say each one of these experiences shaped me in some important way. So I started off in a little bitty architectural firm in Wichita, Kansas, where I literally learned everything I know about architecture in the 2.5 years that I was there. Then I went to the corporate offices of Pizza Hut, which were actually also located in Wichita, Kansas. Designed Pizza Huts for a couple of years, including, I'm very proud to say, the 1983 new prototype store, which was built all over the country. Then I went to St. Louis and worked for a firm called Hastings and Chivetta, where I designed a lot of collegiate rec centers, and I mean a lot of collegiate rec centers, including that one at the University of Toledo, which was the very first college rec center, I will tell you, to have a leisure pool in it. And that was a breakthrough concept in the late 1980s. Then I went back to Kansas City, worked for a very good design firm called Aben Singleton Associates. Then I jumped back to St. Louis again with a firm called Christner. The picture on the lower left is the Missouri Botanical Garden Monsanto Research Center, which is a super sustainable building before sustainability was cool. The picture that you're missing, which I'm very sorry about, is for 14 years I worked at HOK Sport, which later became Populous, and where I designed a ballpark that you may be familiar with called PNC Park. And then for the last 14 years, I've been at Convergence Design, which is a firm that I own and is located in Kansas City. So that's my career in a super fast nutshell. The picture on the lower right is the Stride Bank Center in Enid, Oklahoma. I could tell you long stories about all of these projects, but I won't. But I want to share with you a couple of watershed moments in my life. Obviously, coming to Christ as a college student was a watershed moment, but I kind of bumped along in my faith for a while without thinking much about it. And I will say that really for the first 20 years of my professional career, I knew I was a Christian and I knew I was an architect, but I didn't really know what those 2 things had to do with one another. And I will say that part of the fault is mine, but part of the fault was the evangelical culture that I was in didn't really know how to talk about what I did for work. What I heard from the pulpit and from guest speakers and from parachurch organizations was that if you want your life to count for something, you'll go on the mission field, or you'll give a lot of money, or in some other way, you'll do something that counts for significance, because the only thing that really matters is human souls. And none of this, built environment stuff that I was living with 40 or more hours a week means anything. The logic at the time was, it's all going to burn anyway, so why bother? Which is not helpful if you're an architect. So, and I promise you, Abe and I did not coordinate our presentations, but what changed for me, the watershed moment, was when our church did this 3-year study on cultural engagement. There was 40 people in our church that went through this, committed to do it for 3 years. Steve Garber, who's here in the room, was part of that discussion, but also a gentleman named Mike Metzger, who lives in Annapolis, helped facilitate that discussion for 3 years. We studied a lot of things, but one of the things we studied was this idea of this 4-chapter story. And this was a real watershed moment for me because I had very much been steeped in the culture of the 2-chapter gospel of sin and redemption. That's all there was, just sin and redemption. We're all sinners. We need to be saved. Jesus saves us. Those things are true. They are not false, but they're not the whole story. And the whole story, when you bring the creation account into it, and the goodness of work and the way that God created the world for us to cultivate, all of a sudden architecture can become part of that picture. And then you see the fall and the redemption and then the new creation, which interestingly, an amazing book I read during this period was a book called Sidewalks in the Kingdom by Eric Jacobson, who made the point, not original to him, but he made the point that heaven is not the Garden of Eden. Heaven is a city. The New Jerusalem is a city, and you can read about it in Revelation. And that was, kind of a blow your mind moment to realize that we're not going from the garden through the fall and redemption to another garden. We're going from the garden through the fall and redemption to a city. Kind of a mind-blowing concept if you're an architect. So anyway, in 2003, when this happened, I'm starting to put these things together in my mind, trying to figure out what this means. And I'd say at that point, I began to have a picture of what my career as an architect was about. So much so that in 2010, I was invited to speak at Jubilee. This is not me, this is Byron Borger. And I was not on the main stage. I was speaking to a little seminar of architecture and engineering students in a very small meeting room. But I will tell you, that was a peak experience of my life. Designing PNC Park was probably the peak experience of my career, but speaking at Jubilee was a peak experience in my life. That was in February of 2010. In March of 2010, I was called into a conference room at Populous and told that I was being laid off because it was the recession and the economy was in a shambles. Architecture firms were laying off people right and left, and I was told that my services were no longer required. At that point, I was 55 years old, overpaid, overranked, and realized that I had zero chance of catching a job with another architectural firm. I also realized that I'd worked at that point 31 years for other people, being paid a salary, and had never been self-employed. So that led to watershed moment number 2. Which was, whoops, I missed a slide. There we go. Watershed moment number 2, which was the opportunity to do something I'd threatened to do for a long time, which was start my own firm. And this goes back to the thinking that happened during this 3-year cultural engagement study. I always said, if I ever got my own firm, I'm going to call it Convergence. And the reason I'm going to call it Convergence is because of these. You may be old enough to remember, or maybe not. We used to have these video projectors that were these big honking machines that had the 3 lenses on them, right? The red, green, and blue lens. And when you set one of those things up, the very first thing you had to do was turn all these dials to adjust what? The convergence. You had to get the 3 pictures to align, the red picture, the green picture, and the blue picture to line up, otherwise it would just look like a mess. And what I realized, why that was such an important metaphor for me was, I realized that my life, up until the point of the first watershed moment, was very much not converged. I had a work me, and I had a family me, and I had a community me, and those me's were not very aligned. And so I said, if I ever start a design firm, I'm going to call it Convergence. And what we're going to try to do at Convergence is we're going to try to, not just architecturally, but in all of life, live a seamless, integrated, converged life. That means that, and I have an illustration for this, that instead of a compartmentalized life where I have a work bucket, a community bucket, and a family bucket, we're going to try to draw those things together to a converged, integrated picture of a life. And so that's what we attempt to do at Convergence Design. We try to live out this idea of an integrated, seamless, holistic life. And that is why our logo looks like this. It's a series of overlapping circles that suggest this idea of integration of work, faith, community, and family commitments all intersecting. I will also say that we recognize right up front that we never get this perfect. We never get those three circles to perfectly align. It just cannot be done. There are times when our work commitments demand more of us than our families would like. There are times when our family commitments demand more of us than our work would like. And we recognize the imperfectibility of that converged lifestyle, that we're never going to get it exactly perfect. But we still affirm the idea of convergence and the idea that we're all trying to live an integrated life where we're not one person at work and a different person at home. So what does that look like in real life? I'm going to wrap up, and if there's any Baptists in the room, you'll appreciate that I have 3 points and they all start with the letter E. We try at Convergence Design to evade the idea of work-life balance. Now, some of you may think that work-life balance is a virtue. I'm going to suggest to you it's not a virtue, it's a problem. Because it suggests, the idea of work-life balance suggests that work and life are, first of all, two different things, and second of all, that they're in tension with one another. That your life is in tension with your work, and that the best you can hope for is to balance that tension on a teeter-totter. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not a good metaphor for thinking about life. I want you to come away from here with the convergence metaphor of integrating work and life, and also, by the way, faith and community commitments into a seamless whole. We also try to erase business and personal distinctions, and I will tell you, that is easier said than done, because the United States Department of Labor does not like it. The Internal Revenue Service does not like it. So most of the official bureaucracy of the world does not like the idea of erasing business and personal distinctions. But when I get in my company car and drive my wife to a picnic, she says, "Should we be taking the company car for this?" I said, "It's converged." It's all converged. And then the third E is embrace my various roles 24/7, 365. So the idea of a convergence lifestyle is I'm not an architect from 9 to 5 on Monday through Friday and a husband and a father those other hours. I'm an architect 24/7, 365. I'm a husband 24/7, 365. I'm a father 24/7, 365. I'm a member of my community. I'm a member of my church 24/7, 365. So when people come up to me at work and say, "Is it okay if I go to the dentist?" I'm like, "Don't you understand? This is Convergence Design. Of course it's okay that you go. You don't even have to ask me if you can go to the dentist. It's your life. You get to live it every day, every hour of every day of every week." So that's my story. That's the Convergence Design story. And that's how the 4-chapter gospel works itself out in my life. Thank you.